Welcome to Benchmarks Lunch and Learn. My name is Patty Riley. I assist Gary and David Rates. Today our topic is the retirement experience. We do welcome questions. Feel free to type them in the chat box or unmute and ask. With that, I'll turn it over to Gary.
Thanks, Patty. My name is Gary Rates. I'm the founder of Benchmark Financial Group, and I currently work with my son, David Rates, who is president of Benchmark Financial Group. Today is going to be a great meeting because it's going to address how a process works from start to end, and it's on retirement. So David is with our guest, going to be exchanging questions with our guest, Jay Gaumer, who is a retired federal employee. He spent 36 years with the FAA, retired as a air traffic controller and staff specialist, and currently spends his time woodworking, writing fiction, science fiction, and arranging music for the orchestra. And it's going, as I said, it's going to be a great presentation because we're going to talk about all the things people go through when they announce that they're going to retire. So I'm going to turn it over to David, and we're going to get started.
Well,
full day.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Like Dad was saying, the general theme of this month's Zoom call is just kind of getting a 1,000-foot up view of the retirement experience, and kind of from start to finish. And there's a lot of gray areas or just certain pieces of information that you probably want to get some clarification on before pulling the trigger finally on retirement. So we're lucky enough to have Jay with us, who has been through it in person, and it's going to be insightful to hear his point of view on a few pieces of the pie. So this is our disclaimer. Since we're securities licensed, we always have to put this in every piece of marketing material that we send out to the public. But in a nutshell, it's just saying that we're trying to be as accurate as possible with the information that we're presenting to you guys, and not making any guarantees on anything. So onward and upward. All righty. So should I clarify my service computation date? Service computation date is a big piece of the pie, and sometimes there can be a discrepancy between your service comp date for leave and service comp date for retirement. But oftentimes it takes some legwork to iron out whether or not your service comp date is the way that it's supposed to be. Jay, in your experience, was it pretty straightforward, or were there any extra steps that you needed to take to get things ironed out for your service comp date in terms of getting an accurate starting point for measuring that retirement pension amount? Or
for me, it was not an issue. My hire date was I had no breaks in service, no military time to compute in there as well, that sort of thing. I just made the request for that when I made my first request for a retirement estimate, just to verify that we had a solid date to work with.
Got it. Well, and one thing to keep in mind too is if you're in a spot where you left the government and then came back to work and maybe took your contributions out of the retirement system, there's deposits that need to be made for that. Usually the big one that a lot of people run into is if they have military time, you can make a deposit for your military time. You get service credit for your first pension calculation. But I always try to remind folks that this process is kind of like turning an aircraft carrier. So sometimes it's an exercise in being politely annoying, but getting final credit for that military time requires you to file a form with HR, wait for them to get back with an estimated amount of what you're supposed to pay, and then initiate that process. So it's not an instantaneous thing, and it requires you to dig up some identifying documents, submit them the way that they're supposed to be submitted, and then oftentimes hurry up and wait, and like I said, try to be politely annoying to the person that you're working with to get things done. So it's always important to keep in mind that certain pieces, especially like this, take a little poking and prodding to get things done in a timely manner. So all righty, what is the best timing of the retirement application? So generally you submit it to HR. You deal with the OPM backlog, but the earlier you submit the application, the less there are chances of a delay. And Jay, in your experience, was it pretty smooth sailing, or was there like a prolonged delay and then getting your interim pension checks to you? Or
Well, comparing my own experience to a lot of my peers whom I stay in touch with, I think I'm right. I fall right in the average of how everything was calculated. I submitted my paperwork to HR 4 months in advance. And I also submitted a form that I was turning in some of my leave, selling it back to cashing it in. So I retired the end of the month of July, and I received a check for my leave that I was bought back in mid-September. So there's a month and a half right there. And then October 1, I received a check for August and September, a 50% estimate of my annuity. And then November 1, I got a 70% check for my annuity. And that continued until March, when I finally got a letter saying that they calculated it. So it was, about 9 months. And that seems to be about the average. Everybody experiences about 9 months. There's been some faster, 4 months, and some longer, over a year. But I will say the final amount did a match to the dollar what my estimate was from OPM.
when it comes to dealing with the retirement process in terms of submitting it to HR and then them forwarding everything on to OPM, I always joke, again, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. So if you don't have your ducks in a row prior to getting the ball rolling with that tends to delay things longer than you like to have them delayed. And oftentimes, for whatever quirky reason, the leave year ends in the first few days of January. So if it makes sense in your individual situation to gravitate towards the end of the year, like 12/31 for a retirement date, you got to account for the fact that there's always a bottleneck of folks retiring at the end of the year. And that's not necessarily anything to be afraid of. It's just something you want to plan for on the front end, because OPM is kind of like a black hole. You throw your name in the hat and hope it lands on top and hurry up and wait for them to get back to you. It's just, when they start paying you interim pension payments, you don't know if you're going to get 30% or 50% or 70%. So there's just this window of time where you're kind of floating in limbo land, and you just want to know the cards that you're working with, and be strategic about planning throughout that process. So you have enough money to make ends meet, cover cash flow.
The more complex your computation is, does factor in on what kind of interim payment you'll receive. If you have bought back some of your military time, or there was a divorce or something like that in the process of retirement, it does seem to factor in. They don't give you as much as an interim payment.
And to that point, Jay, the best thing to do is dig up all that identifying documentation. So like, if you're buying back military time, you want to have a copy of the receipt, copy of DD 214, because if you provide that information when you submit the retirement package, it just lessens the margin for error, because you don't want to assume that the folks that are processing your retirement paperwork are going to go find that information for you. Oftentimes, I mean, if you've already got the credit for your military buyback built into your service comp date, it's you've gotten credit for it. It's just they still want to make you verify proof that you've paid for it. So just little things, and there's more little things than you would think of that you want to have ironed out prior to formally submitting that application for retirement. And then if you're in a spot where you have former spouses that are entitled to a portion of your pension, that one is definitely one you might want to schedule a time to come talk to us, because we've helped a lot of folks work through that situation. It's not the easiest thing to get done. So, and you gotta present the divorce settlement in a specific way, a format that Uncle Sam wants it to be submitted in, and it can take a lot longer than people are anticipating. So something to always be aware of. All righty, so what happens first? Phase 1, leave and earnings statement, annual leave payment, and notice of final separation. So when you have separate from service, your final paycheck will be one of the first things that comes in, but your annual leave chunk gets paid by your agency. So, Jay, did that process for you move pretty streamlined and pretty quickly, or was there any kind of extended delay that caused that payment to get processed on your end, or?
Well, streamlined would be subjective. Like I said, my last day was July 31st. I received my leave payment mid-September.
Yeah.
September 14th. So to me, that seemed a fairly decent turnaround, and I wasn't sure how long to expect, but it was okay.
And one thing to keep in mind about that leave payment, it's usually I mean, depending on the hours that you have at the point of retirement, it can be a pretty robust payment. It's just Uncle Sam will automatically withhold 20% off the top of that amount for federal tax withholding. So you always want to keep that in mind. It's pretty much a general rule. Any lump sum payment of cash, like annual leave, anytime Uncle Sam pays you a lump sum like that, they take 20% off the top for federal taxes. And then once you get the notice of final separation, that's when HR is done with everything on their end, and then they forward all your information to the OPM. Office of Personal Management is the entity that you communicate with as a retiree. So again, you want to have all your ducks in a row going into that process, because once they forward all your information to OPM, they don't keep any of your information at the agency anymore. So
Kept 35% of my annual payment. my leave, they kept 35%.
So that is another minor caveat. Depending on the time of year, that generally they withhold 20% for federal taxes, but sometimes depending on when you retire, there have been situations where they've withheld quite a bit more, but that's based off of your adjusted gross income. And so hopefully they don't withhold 35, but you can count on them withholding some percentage out of that gross annual leave amount. So, but circling back, one of the reasons a lot of people retire at the end of the year is, hypothetically, if you carried over 240 hours like most people can, and then you strategically conserved 208 hours, didn't use any leave in that last year of active employment, you retired 12/31, you can sell back 448 hours to Uncle Sam. There won't be a delay in them processing your pension payment, but the payment for that leave comes in a new tax year. So if you're retiring 12/31/2023, you would get your payment for annual leave in the 2024 tax year, which is important, because if you retire a month or two earlier than that and you have a lot of leave, that's going to be income in that last year of employment. So all righty, so what happens to FEHB, dental, and vision? So obviously you're transferred to OPM after retirement. During interim pay, no deductions are taken out. Premiums for FEHB are retroactively deducted once retirement is finalized. And then when it comes to dental and vision, they're kind of, it's a government benefit, but they're kind of on their own island. You communicate separately with benefeds for dental and vision. But Jay, do you have any issues in terms of dealing with dental and vision, or?
The advice was to let them know you're retiring.
Yeah.
So that they could send you bills to continue your benefits, because you have to go ahead and pay your monthly on that. Well, I did that, but they'd already sent me a letter before I even had an opportunity. So I got a letter with all of that information with a billing statement, and just made payments. You write a check, or you can go online and pay. And so, I just made my own payments until that got rolled in. And once I got the final offer, then it rolls into your deductions.
And it's not like you miss out on anything while you're on that interim pay status. It's kind of like a hurry up and wait until we're done crunching the numbers, and then they pay you all the money that you're owed. It's just you don't necessarily know exactly how long that process is going to take. So it's good to account for that on the front end of putting a plan of it together for retirement. So. All righty. How do I obtain my benefit information? So once everything is finalized with OPM, they're going to send you this nice little book with a blue cover, which details each piece of the pie, but it'll spell out the exact payment amounts for everything. Because when you're on interim status, they're essentially auditing your work history and giving you a payment amount that's relatively close to what you're supposed to be getting, but that we were talking about that 2, 3, 4 month window of time where you're kind of floating in limbo land. That's because OPM is crunching the numbers to get the exact payment amount of what your pension is going to be, in addition to all the other pieces. So once you finally get that blue book, that's when you know they're done putting together the final calculation. So, all righty. How do interim pension payments work? All right, so interim pay status. After OPM receives your retirement application record, interim payments usually about 60%, 60 to 80% of your full pension annuity, but that doesn't include the first supplement. So how long did it take for the first supplement to kick in for you, Jay?
It wasn't, I didn't get a first supplement until March.
Okay.
When they finalized it. So, like I said, I retired the end of July.
Yep.
It was mid-August that I got an email and a letter stating that they'd set up my account.
Yeah.
And that my stuff had been processed to OPM.
Okay.
And I didn't get that first annuity payment or an interim payment until mid-October for August and September, which was 50%.
Yep.
And then I got another letter from them a week later saying that they're closer, and I got a 70% starting in November, and that's what I got through February. And then March 1, I received my full, and middle of March, I received the makeup check, what they didn't pay me. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I think it's important, though, David, that you emphasize depends on how complex your first service history is as to how that's going to get paid out and how that's going to work.
Yeah, the first supplement was not included, although I will say the 70% that I was basing my amount in does include the first supplement.
Okay.
So it was the annuity plus a first supplement. I got 70% of that total value.
But even the first supplement was part of the interim amount that they were crunching for, several months before they finally got to that full number. So even those two major pieces of the pie, if you're in a spot where you have the years of service in to retire and you're eligible for that supplement, it doesn't move instantaneously. So and then that first full pension payment in a general sense, we've had clients that have gotten from start to finish in 3 months. We've had clients that if they have, maybe 1 or 2 former spouses that are entitled to a portion of their first pension, that process can take upwards of a year. So to Dad's point, it really is a byproduct of how complex your first service history is going to directly result in how long it's going to take for them to finalize your pension calculation. And if you have an extenuating circumstance like a divorce, you want to get that ironed out and the information submitted to HR and OPM in the format they wanted submitted, or else you're just going to float in limbo land for longer than you want to float in limbo land. So when can I expect my final annuity payment? OPM verifies all records and service prior to sending. Obviously, like we said a second ago, finalizes your monthly pension payment. And then to Jay's point, retroactive annuity payments, they're not paid during interim pay status. and FEHB, FEGLI, and all the other appropriate deductions are taken after the fact. But so how long, Jay, again, how long did it take for them to shore up that the amount that they were owed after you got past the interim pension payment? What was it, instantaneous from like you finally got the actual pension payment amount that you're planning to get, and then shortly thereafter they paid you the lump sum of everything else?
It was 2 weeks. So I received my first full payment of my pension on March 1, and around the 15th, 17th of March, I received a second check making up for the previous 9 months of interim payments. And out of that is where they deduct all the other stuff that you haven't paid for those 9 months.
I'm curious though, did they send you the My Benefits book after that payment or prior to that payment?
I think I received that booklet the last week of February, and got my first payment on March 1.
Okay. So they should be able to give you those finalized numbers shortly before.
They don't tell you anything about your makeup payment in that booklet.
Yeah. All righty. So moving on. So when you retire from the federal government and move on to being an OPM retiree, your main identification number is what they call a civil service annuity number. And like we said a second ago, it's essentially your identification number with OPM, and that's what they reference anytime you have correspondence with OPM. It'll take a few days after you formally retire to actually get the CSA number, because HR has to process the final paycheck, get you your leave payment, and then once they forward all that information to OPM will send you a packet that says, hey, well, congrats on retiring, welcome to being an OPM retiree. That packet will have your civil service annuity number in it, but there'll be a 5 to 7 business day lag where they mail you a temporary password. And you want to keep an eye out for that temporary password, because we've had a few clients in the past that have just kind of arbitrarily thrown that one away. And if you don't use that temporary password that they snail mail to you within a certain window of time, then it's null and void, and then you got to request another one to get mailed to you. So it's important, because OPM's website is really the main resource of information to get status updates on where your retirement application is in process. So it's definitely important to not only keep an eye out for the welcome packet from OPM, but definitely keep an eye out for that temporary password that they'll be sending you via the mail to get logged into OPM's website. And OPM's website is servicesonline.opm.gov. And it's like I said, it's an important one to periodic, and they don't give you daily updates, but they'll give you periodically once your files move to a case manager, once they issue you a interim pension payment, there'll be a statement for that. So you can't easily call OPM and ask them questions, which is frustrating for a number of different reasons, but you can use their website to get an idea of where several things are at in process and make adjustments to things, even after the point of the retirement calculations are finalized. So, and then TSP eligibility usually takes a couple weeks after the point of retirement to be able to tap into TSP funds, whether or not you want to use it for an income source and keep money at TSP or roll it outside. TSP is, again, it's a federal program, obviously, but they're kind of like on their own island. So their timing is a heck of a lot faster than HR and OPM. So that's important to know. But it's also important to have a strategy in mind of, if you want to use some TSP funds for monthly income, you want to have that strategy mapped out and know what your plan is, because you don't know how long it's going to take for all the other pieces to start rolling in too. So we've had a few clients over the years that were very grateful that they were able to get that TSP income rolling prior to all the pension and supplemental pieces getting finalized, because it took a little bit longer than they were anticipating. And that TSP income stream was an important source to cover household expenses while they were in limbo land. So This is just a snapshot of services online, their website. Just go to servicesonline.opm.gov, and as long as you have your retiree number and that temporary password, you shouldn't have any issues getting logged in. And then how do I contact OPM after retirement? Retirement Information Office, there's an 800 number, opm.gov/support. That would probably be the most effective way to do it. And I always joke there's a walk-in center in Washington, D.C. So if you get really pissed at OPM, you can fly out to DC and walk right in.
If you're going to call them first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And because if you wait past 9 a.m., you're not going to talk to anybody. I called 3 different times first thing in the morning, and I only talked to a person once, and it was after an hour and a half wait. So, and then all of the requests that I did have took them 2 months to respond to. So
Yeah,
keep that in mind.
We had a similar situation where we were on the phone with OPM, and finally, by the time somebody picked up the phone after about 48 minutes, the incorrect button got clicked on the phone and we got cut off, which made me want to go bang my head against the wall a few times. But it's kind of like with Social Security. If you're scheduling a time to go meet with Social Security to get the ball rolling with turning on your Social Security benefit or just general questions, the name of the game is to call earlier in the week, earlier in the day. So that's usually when the season bets are working.
Same thing. Yep.
You call like 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, you're not going to get very far. So, which I know is a bit frustrating because every person that retires from the federal government has to deal with OPM, but they're not the easiest entity to get into contact with. So you just got to know that going into the process. Patty, do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions right now. Just in case, you feel free to type in the chat box or unmute and ask if you have any questions for David, Gary, or Jay. And if in case you don't know, each month we have 2 different opportunities for you to learn about retirement planning. One is in person. It's an opportunity to join us for lunch, meet Gary and David, and talk about retirement planning. The next in-person lunch and learn is Wednesday, September 20th at the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Association. That's at 2300 Main near Union Station. The other opportunity is our Zoom webinar, which is what was today. Each month, Gary and David discuss a relevant topic depending on what's going on at the time of the year, concerns and challenges they are hearing from people getting ready to retire. The next Zoom webinar is Thursday, September 21st. You may come to one, or since they're different, you're welcome to come to both. David, do you have anything to add?
I would say if you're interested in getting the ball rolling with a preliminary retirement strategy, usually our first step, we call it a fact-finding meeting, where we send you a list of info to gather, and it's just an information gathering and sharing. And the more accurate the information that we can get from you is, the more accurate we can be with the numbers that we're talking to you about. So second meeting, we take all that info and put together a written plan for you that just breaks down each piece of the pie. And oftentimes there's multiple decisions to be made with each piece of the pie. So that second meeting tends to take a little bit longer than the first one, just because there's a lot of variables to go through. And we always joke, sometimes it feels like you're trying to take a drink from a fire hose when you're going through it the first time, but the more times you review it, the more pieces of information tend to stick. So, and then in subsequent meetings, if you decide you want to work with us, it's an exercise in getting the ball rolling with implementing the strategy. And then the people that we work with, even after the point of retirement, they stay clients, and so we make adjustments to the plan as needed as life happens. So it's an ongoing relationship. And yeah, like I said, life happens even when you're formally retired from the government. So what items to bring for the first meeting. All right, so usually it's important, if possible, to bring just a recent leave and earning statement, because we like to run a net to net income comparison, where we break down what's your net monthly income that you're living on currently relative to net monthly income at the point of retirement. So you can see there's a lot of things you pay for as an active employee that go away at the point of retirement. So sometimes when people are just looking at the retirement estimate, it gets scary because they're looking at this gross number, and it's quite a bit lower than the gross income they're used to living on as an active employee. But then you got to take into account that you're going to have a fraction of the deductions as a retiree that you had while you were working full time. So and then any sort of retirement estimates that you can get your hands on are always valuable pieces of information to have. Just a copy of a recent TSP statement, any other investment accounts that you have earmarked for retirement income, life insurance policies, whole life insurance policies, long-term care policies. Those are always important to take a look at if you haven't looked at them in a while. Social Security statement, if you can get through their website and they don't lock you out, it's always important to just periodically just take a look at what your social security statement is looking like. And if you can get a copy of that, that's a fantastic piece of info to have as well. Divorce degree is important if that's something you're dealing with, because you want to double check that one and just reread it and make sure there aren't any sections that you skipped over the first time you looked at it. So, and then oftentimes people have spouses that they want to have their benefits incorporated into an overall plan as well. So those would be the main ones. We don't have any questions.
No questions.
Thanks for tuning in this month. And if you think of anything in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out. You can give me a call directly, shoot me an email, or just go to our website and go to the appointments section, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And Jay, again, thank you for taking the time. It's always useful to get an insider's point of view on all this stuff. So
Pleasure, happy to help.